I never thought I'd return to Miller's Hollow. The town had been fading away long before I left, like a candle burning at both ends. People either moved out or wasted away quietly, swallowed by the endless fields and the silence that seemed to seep into the bones of everyone who stayed. When I was a kid, the town had a strange charm. Parades in the summer, church bells every Sunday, and neighbors who left pies cooling on windowsills. But by the time I was a teenager, it had already begun its slow collapse. Stores closed, families disappeared without notice, and the woods that bordered the town seemed to creep closer every year, as though the trees themselves wanted to smother what was left of us. I left when I was 18 and swore I'd never look back. But 20 years later, a letter brought me home. It wasn't typed or even written neatly, just a shaky scrawl on yellow paper. They're coming out again. You're the only one who remembers. Come back. Please. Harold. Harold Myers was the last friend I had in Miller's Hollow, the only one who'd stayed. He was older than me by a few years, always the quiet type, the kind who saw things most people overlooked. When we were kids, Harold used to talk about shadows moving on their own, about voices whispering at the edge of the fields. Most people laughed him off. I didn't, because I had seen them too. The drive back felt like stepping into a memory I didn't want to revisit. The further I went, the emptier the road became. Houses turned to barns, barns open land, and then to the hushed woods that seemed denser than I remembered. When the sign for Miller's Hollow finally appeared, it was so weather-beaten I could barely read the name. The town was worse than I'd imagined. Boarded-up shops lined Main Street, their broken windows gaping like missing teeth. The gas station was shuttered. The diner's sign hung at an angle, and the old church bell tower leaned as if exhausted. Not a single person walked the streets, and the silence was so complete it made the hair on the back of my neck prickle. I went straight to Harold's house. The door was unlocked. The place smelled of mildew and dust, and the floorboards groaned beneath my feet. Harold, I called, my voice too loud in the stillness. No answer. I searched every room until I found the kitchen table. Another note was waiting for me there. They're strongest at night. I'll be at the old mill. Bring a lantern. Don't trust the dark. The old mill, a place we swore never to go back to after what happened in the summer of '89. I was 15, Harold was 18. A group of us used to sneak out at night, daring each other to go into the woods or explore abandoned buildings. The old mill was the ultimate dare. It sat on the far edge of the hollow, swallowed by trees and rot. The night we went, something followed us back. At first, we thought it was just a trick of the eyes, a flicker in the shadows, a shape slipping between trees. Then came the whispers, low, guttural voices that didn't sound like anything human. One by one, the kids who went into the mill with us changed. Some moved away almost immediately. Others stayed but grew hollow-eyed, like something had drained the life out of them. And a few just vanished. No one ever talked about it, except Harold and me. We promised never to go back. By the time the sun began to set, I was standing at the edge of the woods, clutching the old lantern I'd found in Harold's shed. The path to the mill was half swallowed by brambles, the trees leaning in like watchful sentinels. The mill itself rose from the earth like a rotting corpse, its wooden frames sagging, windows broken, the wheel long fallen into the riverbed. The closer I got, the colder the air became. Not just cool, but biting, unnatural, like the warmth was being pulled out of the world. Inside, the floorboards creaked and the stench of damp rot filled my nose. I raised a lantern, its dim light cutting through the blackness. Harold, I whispered. Something shifted in the corner. At first, I thought it was him. But when the figure stepped into the light, my blood turned to ice. It was tall, too tall, its limbs spindly and wrong, like tree branches bending against a storm. Its face, or what should have been a face, was just a mass of shifting shadow, darker than the dark around it. The lantern flickered violently as though the thing was sucking the light from it. I stumbled back, heart hammering. No, no! The creature tilted its head, almost curious, before it slipped soundlessly back into the darkness. And then a voice whispered behind me, "You came back!" I spun, nearly dropping the lantern. Harold stood there, his face pale, his eyes bloodshot. He looked older than his years, worn down by something more than time. "They're stronger now," he said, his voice shaking. "They've been feeding. The town's already gone." Harold explained everything in broken fragments. After I left, the shadows began appearing more often, at night, in houses, sometimes even during the day. People tried to fight at first, but the more they resisted, the faster they disappeared. Eventually, most just gave in, letting the darkness swallow them. "They don't kill you," Harold whispered. "They take you, hollow you out until there's nothing left but a shell. That's what happened to the others." "And you? Why are you still here?" I asked. His eyes darted to the corners where the shadows seemed to arrive just beyond the lantern's glow. "Because I remember, and because I can't leave." We both flinched as a sound echoed through the mill. Footsteps, too many of them, circling us. The shadows pressed closer, their forms stretching like liquid darkness. "We have to go," I hissed, but Harold shook his head. "It's too late for me, but you can still get out. Take the lantern. Don't let it go out. Don't stop walking until you're out of the woods." I tried to argue, but the floor beneath us groaned and split, black tendrils rising up like skeletal hands. Harold shoved me toward the door, his voice breaking. "Go!" I ran. Branches clawed at me as I tore through the woods, the lantern swinging wildly in my hand. Behind me, I heard Harold scream, short, sharp, and then cut off as though swallowed whole. The shadows followed. I could hear them moving, whispering, their voices worming into my head. "Stay, join us, you belong here." The lantern flickered. My heart nearly stopped. I shook it, prayed, begged, anything to keep the light alive. At last, the trees thinned, the road appeared, and I stumbled into the open. The shadows stopped at the tree line, writhing but never crossing. Their forms melted back into the woods, leaving only silence behind. I never saw Harold again. I called the police, but they found nothing at the mill. No Harold, no shadows, nothing but a collapsed building. The officer looked at me with pity when I told him what happened, like I was just another ghost of this dying town. I should have left then. I should have gotten in my car and never looked back. But something keeps me here. At night, I hear them outside the house I'm staying in, the whispers, the scraping, the faint tapping at the windows. And I know it's only a matter of time before the lantern goes out. Miller's Hollow is not a town anymore. It's a graveyard, and the shadows are the grave diggers. And now, I think they're waiting for me. I grew up in Ashburn, a small town tucked away in the hills, the kind of place people only remembered existed when they needed gas between cities. It had one street light, 2 diners, and more old churches than anyone needed. Outsiders always said it felt like time had stopped there, but for those of us who lived in Ashburn, it wasn't just time that lingered. Something else did too, something older and darker. I left when I was 19, running off to college and promising myself I'd never come back. The place had always felt suffocating, like the woods pressed too close, and the air carried whispers you couldn't quite make out. But then last year, after my mother died, I had no choice. The house she left me sat at the far end of Ashburn, right against the tree line, and no one in town wanted to buy it. I told myself I'd fix it up, sell it, and get out again. Just a few months, I thought. But the longer I stayed, the more I began to notice that Ashburn was not the same town I remembered. People avoided eye contact. The church bells no longer rang, and every night, at exactly 2 in the morning, a siren would wail. Not the kind you hear from ambulances or police cars. This one was different. Low, mournful, almost like it was crying. The first night I heard it, I thought maybe it was an old factory whistle. But then I remembered, Ashburn never had a factory. I asked around, but no one wanted to talk about it. At the diner, when I mentioned the siren, forks paused midair, conversations died, and every eye turned toward me, cold and silent. The waitress leaned down, whispered harshly, "Don't ask about it again if you know what's good for you." But I couldn't stop thinking about it. The third night, I stayed up and watched from my mother's living room window. At exactly 2, the siren wailed, rolling through the hills, vibrating in my chest. The street outside was empty, but then I noticed doors slowly opening up and down the road. One by one, people stepped outside. They moved stiffly, mechanically, their eyes blank, their faces pale. They didn't speak, didn't look at one another. They just began walking toward the woods. My stomach dropped. I didn't follow that night. I just stood frozen at the window, watching as dozens of townsfolk disappeared into the trees. The siren died after a few minutes, and then silence swallowed everything again. The people didn't come back until just before dawn. I watched them shuffle home, their clothes dirt-stained, their eyes even emptier than before. The next day, I cornered Mr. Hanley, my mother's old neighbor. He looked older, weaker, and when I mentioned the siren, his hands began to shake so badly he nearly dropped his cane. "Don't you dare go near them," he hissed. "They'll notice you. Once they notice you, there's no leaving." I begged him to explain, but he slammed the door in my face. On the 7th night, I couldn't resist anymore. When the siren wailed, I grabbed a flashlight, pulled on my boots, and slipped outside. I joined the edges of the crowd, careful to stay far enough back. The air was heavy, damp, smelling of earth and rot. No one spoke. No one even looked at each other. They just marched. I followed them through the streets, across the fields, and into the woods. The deeper we went, the colder it grew. My breath came in pale clouds, though it was the middle of summer. The trees grew thicker, darker, until I couldn't even see the stars overhead. The only sound was the crunch of feet on dead leaves and the distant echo of the siren. After what felt like hours, we reached a clearing. At the center stood a massive pit in the ground, so wide I couldn't see the other side. The townsfolk gathered silently around it, staring down into the endless blackness. My heart pounded so hard I thought it would burst from my chest. I crouched low behind a tree, straining to see. That's when the whispers began. They rose up from the pit, low at first, then louder, until the air trembled with them. Dozens, hundreds of voices, all speaking at once in a language I couldn't understand. The townsfolk swayed, their mouths hanging open. One by one, they stepped closer to the edge. Then, as if on some unseen signal, several simply leaned forward and dropped in. No screams, no hesitation. They just vanished into the pit. I clamped a hand over my mouth to stop from gasping. More people followed, one after another, until at least 20 had disappeared. The rest stood silently, waiting. The whispers grew louder, almost frantic, and for a moment, I swore I saw shapes rising in the darkness below, long, skeletal hands reaching up, shadowy figures writhing against the pit's edges. Suddenly, the siren stopped. The whispers cut off like a switch had been flipped. The remaining townsfolk turned, their movements jerky but synchronized, and began to march back home. My body shook as I stumbled through the woods, desperate not to be seen. I barely slept that night. My dreams were full of whispering voices and endless black pits. The next morning, I forced myself to ask the waitress at the diner again. This time, she didn't scold me. She just looked at me with tears in her eyes and whispered, "Once a year, the hollow takes its due. That's the way it's always been. Better few than all." Then she walked away before I could ask anything else. I thought about leaving that night. packing up and never coming back. But something kept me frozen, something deeper than fear. Maybe it was curiosity, maybe it was madness. Either way, the next time the siren wailed, I followed again. This time, the crowd was smaller. Fewer people left their homes. But when we reached the pit, I swear the shadows below noticed me. The voices didn't just echo, they pressed against my skull, whispering my name. I stumbled backward, panic clawing at me, but I couldn't stop hearing them. Stay, belong, join us. The air was thick, suffocating, pulling me closer. I must have made a noise, because one of the townsfolk suddenly turned his head. His eyes locked on mine. They were empty black, like twin pits themselves. He opened his mouth, and a voice that wasn't his own poured out, "You shouldn't have come." I ran. I don't remember how I made out of the woods. Branches whipped at my face. Roots snagged my feet, but somehow I burst onto the road and didn't stop until I was back at my mother's house. The siren had stopped by then, but the whispers hadn't. They followed me into the house, into my head. It's been 3 nights since then. I haven't left the house. I haven't slept. Every time I close my eyes, I see the pit, the hands reaching up, the people falling willingly into the dark. I keep telling myself I'll leave in the morning, but I never do. Something is holding me here, something stronger than fear, stronger than reason. And tonight, I know the siren will call again. And this time, I'm not sure I'll be able to resist. I never believed the stories about Hollow Creek. It was just another small town tucked between 2 ridges, a place people drove through on their way to somewhere else. My uncle lived there most of his life, and when he died, I inherited his house. Everyone told me to sell it, but I thought a quiet town might be exactly what I needed. I was wrong. The house sat at the end of a gravel road, pressed up against the creek that gave the town its name. At night, the sound of rushing water was constant, like whispers that never stopped. The first week was uneventful. People were friendly enough, though they always seemed distracted, their eyes darting toward the woods or the water as if they expected something to emerge. I chalked it up to small-town paranoia. It was the second week that I noticed a curfew. At exactly 9 each night, without fail, the streets went silent. Lights flicked off, blinds drawn, doors locked. By 9:30, the town was dead. I didn't think much of it until one night I stayed out later than usual. I'd lost track of time walking near the creek. When I came back, the town felt wrong. Too still, too dark. I was fumbling with my keys at the porch when I heard it. A low moan rising from the water, long and guttural, almost like something calling out. The sound rippled through me, freezing me in place. Then I saw a movement, down by the creek, half shrouded in mist. Figures were crawling out of the water. They weren't people, not exactly. They had the shape of people, but their limbs were too long, their movements jerky and unnatural. Their skin looked pale, slick, glistening as though it never dried. They dragged themselves onto the bank, their heads tilting back, mouths gaping wide as they released that awful moan again. I stumbled inside and slammed the door shut. For hours I sat in the dark, listening to them crawl along the street, dragging their wet bodies against the walls, their fingers scratching at doors and windows. At some houses, the scratching was followed by screams. At others, only silence. By dawn, the noise stopped. When I stepped outside, the street was empty, but the mud and water left behind told me I hadn't imagined it. The next morning, I confronted my neighbor, Mrs. Fletcher. She looked at me with pity, her wrinkled face tight with fear. "You heard them," she said softly. "The drowned ones. Don't ever be out after 9. They come looking for what they lost." I asked her what that meant, but she shut the door in my face. Over the next week, I watched. I stayed by my window at night, lantern off, listening. Every time the clock struck 9, the creek came alive. I saw them crawl out again and again, dozens of them, their blank eyes reflecting the moonlight. Some stood in the middle of the street, swaying, dripping water onto the dirt. Others pressed themselves against houses, listening, waiting. One night, curiosity got the better of me. I cracked my window open to hear more clearly. That was when I realized the moaning wasn't just noise. It was words. Faint, garbled, but words. Over and over, the same phrase. Come back! Come back! I barely slept after that. My dreams were filled with water, with icy hands pulling me under, with faces I didn't recognize staring at me from beneath the surface. I finally got the truth out of someone. The town's mechanic, an old man named Ray. He was drunk, and I think that loosened his tongue. He told me that 50 years ago, a flood swallowed Par Hollow Creek. The dam upriver collapsed, and a third of the town was swept away. Bodies were never recovered. The town rebuilt, but the dead never left. They don't rest, he muttered, eyes glassy. They want us with them. Every generation, they take more. That night, I tried to leave. I packed a bag, loaded my car, and drove toward the highway. But when I reached the bridge out of town, I found it blocked. Not by police, not by an accident, by water. The creek had risen impossibly high, spilling over the road, flooding everything. And in that water, I saw them, dozens of pale faces just beneath the surface, eyes open, mouths moving. I threw the car into reverse and sped home, heart slamming in my chest. Now I'm trapped. Every night, the drowned ones come closer. I hear them outside the house, dragging themselves up onto the porch, fingernails scraping against the wood. They whisper through the cracks, voices seeping into my skull. Sometimes, I hear my uncle's voice among them, begging me to join him. Last night, the scratching turned to pounding. The front door shook on its hinges. I don't know how much longer it will hold. I thought about calling for help, but I know no one outside Hollow Creek will believe me. This isn't a place you escape. It's a place that keeps you. The creek is rising again. The whispers are louder. I can hear the boards groaning under their weight as they crawl across the roof. I keep telling myself I'll survive, that I'll find a way out. But deep down, I know the truth. Hollow Creek doesn't let anyone go. And tonight, when the clock strikes 9, I think they'll finally come for me. I grew up in a small town called Dry Hollow, the kind of place where everyone knew your name and your business, too. We had one grocery store, one diner, and a gas station that doubled as the post office. Outsiders never stayed long. They passed through, fueled up, and left like even air was too heavy to breathe. When I left for college, I swore I'd never come back, but life has a way of twisting you back to where you started. After losing my job in the city and breaking up with someone I thought I'd marry, Dry Hollow suddenly felt less like a cage and more like a refuge. My parents were gone by then, and the old family house stood waiting, quiet and stubborn at the edge of town. I got back late on a Sunday evening. The house smelled faintly of dust and old wood, like time had stood still in my absence. As I walked through the creaking halls, I remembered every childhood fear. The way shadows crawled across the ceiling, the whispers I swore I heard from the attic, the sensation of being watched even when I was alone. But I was older now, rational. I told myself it was just memory playing tricks. That night, I sat on the porch, drinking a cheap beer, listening to the crickets. Dry Hollow hadn't changed much, but it felt off, quieter, like the silence had teeth. I noticed something strange. No dog barking, no kids laughing in the distance, not even hum of the highway I remember from childhood. It was as if the town itself was holding its breath. The next morning, I walked into town. The diner was still there, neon sign flickering weakly, but inside it was half empty. People glanced at me, then quickly looked away. Mrs. Green, who used to slip me candy when I was little, just stared at me with hollow eyes and muttered, "You came back." It wasn't a greeting. It was an accusation. I brushed it off, told myself maybe she was just getting senile. But then Tom Miller, who had been my best friend in high school, slid into the booth across from me. He looked 10 years older than he should have. His face drawn, eyes darting around like he was afraid of being overheard. "You shouldn't have come back," he said. His voice was low, shaking. "Nice to see you too." I joked, trying to lighten the mood. He didn't laugh. He leaned closer. It doesn't like it when people leave, and it doesn't like it when they return. Before I could ask what he meant, the waitress slammed the coffee pot down and gave him a hard look. He went quiet, staring at the table. That night, I lay awake in my old bedroom, staring at the ceiling fan spinning slowly above me. The town felt heavier, like something unseen pressed down on it. Around midnight, I heard a knock on the window. Soft, deliberate. I froze. My bedroom was on the second floor. I didn't move, didn't breathe. Another knock, louder this time. Against every shred of logic, I turned my head. A pale face peered through the glass. The features were wrong, too long, too sharp, like someone had carved a human face but hadn't gotten it quite right. The eyes were pitch black, no whites, no irises, just pits. I couldn't scream, couldn't move. The thing didn't try to open the window. It just pressed its face against the glass, fogging it with a breath I couldn't hear. Then it smiled. When I finally dared to blink, it was gone. I didn't sleep. At dawn, I stumbled downstairs. The house was too quiet. I walked out to the porch, and that's when I noticed them. Footprints in the dirt, leading from the woods to the house. Barefoot, too big to be human. I told myself I was imagining things, that maybe it was some prank, but when I went into town again, the stairs were worse. Conversation stopped when I entered. Tom was gone. No one would look me in the eye. That night, I locked every door, every window, but it didn't matter. At 3 a.m, I woke to the sound of whispers. Dozens of them, all around the house, like a crowd had gathered outside. I crept to the window, heart pounding, and saw them. Not just one face this time. Many, dozens of pale figures standing in the yard, their faces tilted up toward my room, all wearing that same wrong smile. I stumbled back, tripping over the rug. The whispering grew louder, filling the house, though their mouths didn't move. It was inside my head. Leave. Stay. Leave. Stay. Leave. Stay. I don't remember much after that. I must have passed out. When I woke, it was daylight. The yard was empty. No footprints this time. But something had changed in me. The air felt thicker, the silence heavier. And when I caught my reflection in the bathroom mirror, for just a second, my eyes looked darker. Too dark. I don't know what dry hollow is hiding. I don't know what those things are. But I can feel them now, even in the daytime, watching me from just out of sight. And worst of all, I'm starting to understand the whispers. They don't want me to leave. They want me to stay. Forever. I never planned on stopping in Merrow Creek. My car broke down there on the way to a work assignment, and I figured it would be a quick detour, get a tow, grab a motel room, leave in the morning. But the second I pulled into town, something felt wrong. It wasn't anything obvious. The houses looked normal, if a little rundown, and people moved along the sidewalks like anywhere else. But no one smiled. Not once. They glanced at me like they recognized me, but I'd never been there before. I checked into the only motel in town. The man at the desk slid me a key without asking my name, his eyes never leaving mine. "Room 6, he muttered. That night, I couldn't sleep. The air inside the room felt too heavy, as if the walls themselves were pressing inward. Around 2 a.m, I heard footsteps in the hall, slow, dragging, circling back and forth. When I finally worked up the nerve to peek through the peephole, the hallway was empty. The next morning, I went looking for a mechanic. The town seemed even quieter in the daylight. People moved, but sluggishly, like they were conserving energy for something unseen. I stopped at the diner for coffee, and when I walked in, every head turned toward me. Conversation stopped. The waitress poured my coffee without asking what I wanted. She leaned close and whispered, "Don't drink the water." Before I could ask what she meant, she straightened up, her face blank again, like nothing had happened. I left the diner unsettled, and that's when I noticed it. Every building had black curtains in the windows. Not just some, all of them, even the church. That night, I tried to convince myself I was imagining things. But then the knocking started. Slow, deliberate, on the walls, on the door, on the window, from all directions at once. I pressed my back against the headboard, clutching the lamp like a weapon. "Who's there?" I shouted. The knocking stopped. Then I heard it, a voice not outside but inside the room, whispering my name. I bolted. I ran out of that motel barefoot, down the street, until I saw the mechanic's garage. The door was unlocked. Inside, under a single flickering light, my car sat waiting, repaired, spotless, like it had never broken down at all. The keys dangled from the ignition. I didn't question it. I jumped in, turned the key, and drove. I didn't stop, didn't look back, until the town disappeared in my rear-view mirror. But when I finally pulled over hours later to breathe, I noticed something. In the back seat, on the dusty upholstery, there were handprints. Black, smeared, too long to be human, and they weren't there before. If you enjoyed these terrifying tales, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories that will keep you awake at night. Tell me in the comments which story scared you most. And remember, the shadows are always closer than you think.